Give us your wedding venue. My son's graduation party is bigger, my brother texted. I'd reserved it a year ago. Stop being selfish, Mom wrote in the family chat. I replied, you're right. Celebrate big. Then I called the coordinator. Cancel their add-on access. When 120 guests arrived to an empty hall at 7 p.m., my brother told 120 people his son's graduation party was at my wedding venue. He never booked it. He never asked. He just added $4,500 in services to my account and sent out the invitations. When I found out, my mother told me to stop being selfish. So I stopped. I stopped being selflessly stupid, called the venue coordinator, and made sure the only thing waiting for those 120 guests was an empty hall with the lights off. My name is Asher Monroe. I am 33 years old, and at the time this happened, I was 11 weeks away from marrying the woman I'd spent 4 years falling in love with. Her name is Lena Hartwell. She's a pediatric occupational therapist who cries at dog adoption videos and organizes her spice rack alphabetically, and once spent 3 hours helping a stranger at Target pick out curtains because she looked overwhelmed and nobody was helping her. Lena is the kind of person the world doesn't make enough of, and I had spent 12 months planning a wedding that was supposed to tell her, in front of everyone who mattered, that I knew exactly how lucky I was. We booked the venue in September, a restored farmhouse estate called Whitfield Hall, about 40 minutes outside the city. Stone walls, string lights over an outdoor courtyard, a converted barn for the reception, and a bridal suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a wildflower meadow. Lena had seen it on a venue tour, and her eyes had filled up before we even got inside. We put down a $6,200 deposit that afternoon. We signed a contract for the full package: catering, bar service, day of coordination, linens, table settings, everything. We'd been making monthly payments since, and by the time my brother decided our venue belonged to him, we had invested just over $14,000 in total. The wedding was set for the last Saturday in June. My brother Ronan is 37. He is 4 years older than me and has spent every one of those 4 years making sure I knew it. Ronan was the firstborn, the one with the big personality, the loud laugh, the firm handshake that held on a beat too long. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and immediately began calculating who was paying attention to him and who wasn't. Everything in Ronan's life was a performance: his job, his parenting, his social media presence, his obsessive need to throw parties that were bigger and louder and more expensive than whatever anyone else was doing. If you had a barbecue, Ronan had a catered cookout. If you went on vacation, Ronan went somewhere better and posted twice as many photos. And at the center of Ronan's universe was his son, Elliot. Elliot was 18 and about to graduate from high school. I want to be clear about something. I liked Elliot. He was a good kid, quiet, smart, a little awkward in the way that teenagers are when they haven't quite grown into their own personality yet. I had helped him with his college applications the previous fall, spent 2 weekends editing his personal essays, and driven him to a campus tour when Ronan was too busy to take him. Elliot didn't ask for what happened. He didn't deserve what happened. Everything that went wrong was his father's doing, and I need that set up front because what follows might make it easy to forget. My mother, Carla Monroe, was the gravitational center of our family's dysfunction. She was emotionally manipulative in the way that only mothers can be, not with cruelty, but with calibration. She knew exactly which words would make you feel guilty, which silences would make you feel small, and which comparisons would make you feel like you were failing at being a son. Her favorite weapon was the phrase, "Your brother has kids." It was her answer to everything. Why should Ronan get priority at holidays? He has kids. Why should I lend Ronan money? He has kids. Why should I give up something I'd been planning for a year? Because Ronan has kids, and kids change everything. And until I had some of my own, I couldn't possibly understand. My father Thomas occupied the same space in the Monroe family that a decorative pillow occupies on a couch. Present, inoffensive, and moved aside whenever anyone needed the seat. He avoided conflict with the discipline of a man who had learned decades ago that disagreeing with Carla resulted in a kind of atmospheric pressure change in the household that lasted for days. Thomas's opinion on family disputes was whatever Carla's opinion was, delivered 30 seconds later in a quieter voice. Ronan had a history of hijacking other people's moments, and I had a history of letting him. When I turned 30, Lena organized a small dinner at a restaurant downtown. Just close friends, nothing extravagant. Ronan showed up 40 minutes late, stood up during dessert, and announced that he'd just been promoted to regional director at his company. The rest of the dinner became a celebration of Ronan's career, while my birthday cake sat untouched on the end of the table. When Lena and I hosted a housewarming after buying our first place together, Ronan brought Elliot and his 2 younger kids, let them run through the house unsupervised, and spent the entire evening telling everyone about the home renovation he was planning. Bigger kitchen, better layout, pool in the backyard. By the end of the night, 3 different guests had asked Ronan about his renovation, and none of them remembered what my new address was. There was also the money. There was always the money with Ronan. 2 years before the venue incident, he had asked me for $2,000 to cover Elliot's orthodontic work. Insurance won't cover the full thing, he'd said on the phone, his voice carrying the rehearsed weariness of a man who had learned that sounding exhausted made people feel guilty for not helping. I transferred the money that afternoon. He never mentioned it again. When I brought it up 6 months later, casually, carefully, the way you mention a debt to a family member when you don't want to sound like you're keeping score, he laughed and said, "Come on, man, that was for your nephew's teeth. You're really going to nickel and dime a kid's dental work." And I felt ashamed for asking. That was Ronan's gift. He could take your money and then make you feel guilty for noticing it was gone. There was the family vacation, too. For years before everything happened, I had booked a cabin in the mountains for a long weekend. Lena and I, Ronan's family, Carla and Thomas. I'd found the place, made the reservation, paid the deposit. 2 weeks before the trip, Carla called to say Ronan thought a beach resort would be better for the kids. No discussion, no vote, just a redirect. I lost the $400 deposit on the cabin because it was non-refundable, and we spent the weekend at a resort Ronan had chosen, where Ronan's kids could swim in a pool that Ronan had decided was more important than the plans I'd already made and paid for. Nobody reimbursed me for the cabin. Nobody acknowledged that the trip had been mine to plan. It was simply absorbed into the Monroe family operating system. Ronan wants, Ronan gets, Asher adjusts. I let it all slide. I let it slide because Carla's voice was in my head every time. He's your brother. He has kids. Don't make this about you. So I didn't. I made everything about everyone else, and I assumed that when my moment came, when it was finally, undeniably my turn, the family would show up for me the way I'd always shown up for them. I assumed wrong. The text from Ronan arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late April, 8 weeks before my wedding. No greeting, no build-up. Just, "Hey, Elliot's graduation party is June 8th. We need your venue. It's bigger, and it's already set up for events. You can reschedule your thing." Your thing. He called my wedding your thing. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "We booked Whitfield Hall a year ago. Everything's set. Catering, coordination, deposits. We can't move it." Ronan's reply came fast. "Come on, Asher. It's his graduation. 120 people are coming. You can have a wedding literally anytime. This is once in a lifetime for my kid." I wanted to type back that a wedding is also once in a lifetime. That's sort of the entire point. But before I could respond, the family group chat lit up. Carla had entered the conversation. "Asher, stop being selfish. Your brother's son worked incredibly hard for this. A graduation only happens once. A wedding can be moved. Be a good uncle and do this for Elliot." Thomas added, "Your mother has a point, Ash." 2 of my cousins chimed in with variations of, "Just move the date. It's not that big a deal." And Anne I hadn't spoken to in 6 months suddenly had an opinion. The chat was moving fast, and every message said the same thing in different words. Your event is less important. Your plans don't matter. Give your brother what he wants because that's what you've always done, and that's what we expect you to keep doing. Lena was sitting beside me when the messages came in. I watched her read them over my shoulder. She didn't cry. Lena isn't a crier when she's angry, but her face went very still, and she set her phone down on the table with the kind of deliberate care that told me she was holding something back. "Are we really going to lose our wedding venue to a graduation party?" she said. I didn't answer, because I was already thinking about something else. Something that had just occurred to me and was growing larger and colder by the second. Ronan had said 120 people were coming. He'd said the party was June 8th. Our wedding was June 28th, 3 weeks later. He wasn't asking for our wedding date. He was asking for our venue, on a different date, because it was already set up for events. But here's what I couldn't figure out. How was he so confident about the venue? How had he already confirmed 120 guests at a location he didn't have a booking for? I called Whitfield Hall the next morning. Madison Blake, the venue coordinator I'd been working with for a year, answered. I asked her a simple question. Had anyone contacted her recently about adding services to my account? The pause on her end told me everything. Actually, yes, Madison said. A man called last week identifying himself as part of your event party. He requested additional catering for 120 guests, a DJ setup, a full decoration package, and extended bar service. He said it was an add-on for a pre-wedding celebration. I processed it under your account since he had your booking reference number. My hands went cold. How much? The additions total $4,480. They were scheduled for June 8th under your contract. Ronan hadn't asked for my venue. Ronan had already taken it. He'd called the coordinator, used my booking reference, which he must have seen on a document at my house or gotten from Carla, and ordered $4,500 worth of services charged to my account. The invitations to his 120 guests had already been sent with Whitfield Hall's address printed on them. The text message to me wasn't a request. It was a notification. He was informing me, after the fact, that my venue had been repurposed for his son's party, and my job was to step aside and be grateful I was allowed to reschedule. I sat in my car in the Whitfield Hall parking lot for 10 minutes after that call, gripping the steering wheel with both hands. The engine was off. The windows were up. And something inside me reorganized itself, not into anger, but into geometry. Clean lines. Sharp angles. A structure that had nothing to do with forgiveness and everything to do with precision. I called Lena from the parking lot and told her what I'd found. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that cut through every excuse I'd ever made for my family. He didn't just try to take the venue, Asher. He already charged it to your name. He was never going to ask. He was going to present you with a bill and a thank you card. She was right. The text message hadn't been a negotiation. It had been an afterthought. Ronan letting me know, out of the barest courtesy, that something I owned had been repurposed for his use. The way you might tell a roommate you ate their leftovers. Not asking. Informing. That evening, I opened my laptop and went through the history. Not just the venue, everything. Every time Ronan had taken something. Every time Carla had told me to let it go. I made a list, and the list kept growing. The birthday dinner he hijacked. The housewarming he turned into his own showcase. The $2,000 for Elliot's orthodontics that evaporated into family air. The $400 cabin deposit I ate when the vacation was rerouted. The $600 I'd lent Ronan for a car repair 3 years ago that he'd promised to repay by the following Friday. A Friday that never came. The family Christmas where I'd bought gifts for every member of Ronan's family and received, from Ronan, a $15 gas station gift card with Merry Christmas, bro written on the envelope in marker. The pattern wasn't subtle. It wasn't even hidden. It was architectural, load-bearing, structural, foundational. My family had been building on top of me for years, and I had been too busy being the foundation to notice that I was being buried alive under the weight of their expectations. I went back to the family group chat. I read every message again. The ones calling me selfish, the ones telling me to move my date, the ones that treated my wedding like a scheduling inconvenience. Then I typed 3 words. You're right. Celebrate big. Carla replied with 3 heart emojis. Ronan sent a thumbs up. 2 cousins sent celebration gifts. The chat moved on to discussing parking logistics for the graduation party. At no point did anyone say thank you. At no point did anyone ask about the wedding. My concession was received with the same energy as a waiter refilling a water glass. Expected, unacknowledged, already forgotten. They thought I'd surrendered. I hadn't. I had just stopped announcing my moves. The next morning, I called Madison Blake at Whitfield Hall. I told her everything. That the man who had called was my brother, that he had no authorization to modify my account, that the add-on services were ordered without my knowledge or consent, and that I wanted every single one of them canceled immediately. Madison was professional and direct. She confirmed that I was the sole contract holder. Ronan's name appeared nowhere in the booking. He had no legal authority to add, modify, or access anything on my account. She canceled the additional catering for 120 guests. She canceled the DJ setup. She canceled the decoration package. She canceled the extended bar service. She reversed $4,480 in unauthorized charges. And she flagged the account so that no modifications could be made without my direct, verified approval. For what it's worth, Madison said before hanging up, this is not the first time someone has tried to piggyback on another client's booking, but it is the first time it's been a family member. I did not cancel my own wedding booking. My contract remained intact. My deposit was secure. My date, June 28th, was untouched. The only thing that had changed was that June 8th, the date Ronan had printed on 120 invitations, now had nothing attached to it. No catering, no DJ, no decorations, no bar, no tables, no linens, nothing. Whitfield Hall would be exactly what it was on any unbooked day. A beautiful, empty building with the lights off and the kitchen locked. And I said nothing to anyone. For 5 weeks. Lena knew. She was the only person who knew. I told her the night I made the call to Madison, sitting on the edge of our bed, and I watched her face move through about 6 emotions in 12 seconds. Shock, anger, disbelief, a flicker of guilt, and then something harder and clearer that settled behind her eyes like a door closing. They were going to take our wedding from us, she said. Not a question. They already had. I just took it back. She nodded once. Good. We didn't discuss it again. We continued planning our wedding. We finalized the seating chart, confirmed the florist, did our cake tasting, picked the playlist for the reception. We lived in the warm, ordinary details of 2 people building something beautiful while, 3 weeks ahead of us on the calendar, a very different kind of event was quietly ceasing to exist. June 8th arrived on a Saturday. I know exactly what happened because 3 different people who were there told me later, independently, and their accounts matched so precisely that I could reconstruct the evening almost minute by minute. Guests began arriving at Whitfield Hall at 6:45 p.m. They were dressed well, suits, cocktail dresses, nice shoes. They carried gift bags and envelopes. They parked along the gravel drive and walked toward the main hall with the easy energy of people expecting music and food and celebration. By 7:15, approximately 120 people were standing in and around a building that was completely dark, completely empty, and completely locked. No tables, no chairs, no decorations, no catering stations, no DJ booth, no bar, no welcome sign, no nothing. Just the beautiful stone walls and string lights of Whitfield Hall sitting in silence, as indifferent as a cathedral that hadn't been told there was a service. Ronan arrived at 7:05 and walked through the front entrance expecting his son's graduation party to be in full swing. What he found was his son standing in an empty hall with his hands in his pockets, surrounded by confused guests who were checking their invitations to make sure they had the right address. The confusion turned to murmuring. The murmuring turned to concern, and the concern turned to the specific kind of social discomfort that happens when 120 people collectively realize that the event they were promised does not exist. A guest approached Ronan near the entrance. Hey, are we early? Where's the setup? Ronan's face was already changing, the confident host expression dissolving into something raw and panicked. There must be a mix-up. Give me 5 minutes. He called the venue's emergency line. A staff member informed him, politely and firmly, that there was no booking under his name for that evening. The additional services that had been requested under another client's account had been canceled 5 weeks ago by the account holder. Whitfield Hall had no obligation, no arrangement, and no contract with Ronan Monroe. That's impossible, Ronan said, loudly enough for the nearby guests to hear. My brother booked this. This is his venue. Call him. Sir, the account holder made the modifications directly. I'm not authorized to share client details, but I can confirm that there is no event scheduled here tonight. Elliot was standing near the back of the hall. He hadn't said a word since realizing the room was empty. His friends from school were clustered around him, looking at their phones, shifting their weight, doing that thing teenagers do when they're embarrassed but trying very hard not to show it. One of his friends whispered something to him. Elliot shook his head and walked outside. He sat on the stone steps in front of the building, loosened his tie, and stared at the parking lot filling with cars that had nowhere to go. He was 18 years old, and he was sitting on the steps of an empty building while 120 people looked for someone to blame. I didn't see this in person, but when I was told about it later, by 2 separate people who watched it happen, I felt the weight of it in my chest. That image lives there now. Not because I caused it, but because Ronan put his son in that position and doesn't seem to understand, even now, that the architect of that humiliation was never me. Ronan called me. I let it ring. He called again. I let it ring. He called a third time and left a voicemail that started calm and ended somewhere between fury and begging. I saved it, but haven't listened to it in months. He called Carla. Carla called me. I answered on the second ring, because I was ready. I had been ready for 5 weeks. What did you do? She hissed. Her voice carried the particular frequency of a mother who has chosen a side and is furious that the other side isn't cooperating. I didn't do anything, Mom. That's the point. Ronan never booked a venue. He used MY account, added $4,500 in unauthorized services under MY name, and sent invitations to 120 people for a party at a place he has no contract with. I didn't cancel his party. He never had one. I just removed the charges he fraudulently added to MY account without my permission. That's not sabotage. That's accounting. There are 120 people standing in an empty hall right now. Asher. Elliot is sitting outside on the steps. His friends are there. His teachers are there. And every single one of them should be asking Ronan why he told them there was a party at a venue he didn't book, didn't pay for, and has no access to. I didn't create this situation, Mom. Ronan did. He printed invitations with someone else's venue address. He committed fraud on someone else's account. He built a party on a foundation that didn't belong to him and told 120 people to show up. How could you do this to your nephew? That boy looks up to you. I love Elliot, Mom. I edited his college essays on my weekends. I drove him to campus tours when his own father was too busy. I have done more for that kid's future in the last 2 years than Ronan has. But Ronan stole my venue. He charged my account. He did it behind my back. And when I objected, you called me selfish in a group chat. So I ask you again, who did this to Elliot? She went quiet. I could hear the distant noise of the gathering through her phone. Voices, car doors, the confused hum of 120 people recalibrating their evening. Someone was asking loudly if there was a backup location. There wasn't. This isn't over, Carla said. You're right, I replied. It isn't. Because I'm getting married on June 28th at Whitfield Hall, and that wedding is happening exactly as planned. You're invited. Ronan is not. I hung up. I dropped the evidence in the family group chat 30 minutes later. The unauthorized add-on invoice from Whitfield Hall showing Ronan's requests charged to my account. Madison Blake's email confirming that I was the sole authorized contract holder. A screenshot of Ronan's invitation with Whitfield Hall's address printed on it. An address he had no right to use. And the original text message from Ronan. You can reschedule your thing. The chat went very quiet. The cousins who had told me to just move the date said nothing. The aunt with the sudden opinion deleted her earlier messages. Thomas, my father, sent a single message. I wish someone had told me the full story. Which was his way of saying he should have asked. Ronan tried to control the narrative. He posted on social media that evening. A vague, wounded message about family letting you down when it matters most, and all I wanted was to celebrate my son. The sympathy comments rolled in. People who knew nothing offered everything. Outrage, support, prayers. It lasted until the next morning, when one of the guests, a colleague of Ronan's who had stood in that empty hall for 45 minutes in a suit and tie, commented, "Maybe explain to people why the venue had no booking in your name. Some of us drove 2 hours for this." Then another guest commented. Then another. The story unraveled publicly in the way stories do when the people who were actually there start talking. Someone posted a photo of the empty hall, just stone walls and silence where there should have been music and food, and it circulated through Ronan's social circle like a verdict. Ronan deleted the post. But the damage was done, professionally, socially, and within the family. Several of his colleagues had brought their families. His boss had attended with a gift and a bottle of wine, and had stood in that empty room watching Ronan make phone calls with increasingly desperate energy. The professional fallout was the kind that doesn't show up on a performance review, but lives in the way people look at you in meetings and decline your lunch invitations. Ronan's wife, who I've intentionally left out of most of this story because she was peripheral to the conflict, finally weighed in during the aftermath. She called Carla and said that she had told Ronan weeks ago to book his own venue, that she had specifically warned him not to involve Asher's wedding in this, and that he had assured her everything was handled. She was humiliated. She had invited her own parents and her co-workers to the party. They had all watched her husband fail to produce an event he had promised. The stress of it fractured something between them that was already strained, And while I don't know the details of what happened in their home that week, I know that Ronan slept at Carla's house for 4 nights afterward. Carla didn't mention this to me. Thomas let it slip during a phone call 3 weeks later, in the middle of a sentence about something else entirely, the way Thomas always delivered information, accidentally, in passing, like a man who didn't realize he was holding a grenade. Elliot didn't speak to Ronan for 3 weeks after the graduation party that never happened. He wasn't angry at me. He sent me a private message 2 days later that said, simply, "I'm sorry my dad did that to your wedding. Congratulations on the engagement." I told him I was proud of him for graduating and that none of this was his fault. He sent back a thumbs up and a period, which is how 18-year-olds say, "Thank you. I don't want to talk about it anymore." Madison Blake informed Ronan, through a formal letter, that Whitfield Hall was considering pursuing unauthorized access charges for the fraudulent modification of a client account. The letter was polite, legal, and devastating. Ronan called me one last time to ask me to call off the venue people. I told him to contact his own lawyer. He called me selfish. I said, "I know. Mom told me." Our wedding happened on June 28th. Whitfield Hall was everything Lena and I had spent 12 months imagining. The string lights glowing over the courtyard, the stone walls catching the late afternoon sun, the wildflower meadow behind the bridal suite bending in a warm breeze that seemed to arrive exactly on schedule. The caterers set up precisely where they were supposed to. The florist had lined the aisle with hydrangeas that Lena had chosen back in January, holding up her phone screen and saying, "These ones, exactly these." The DJ played our playlist in the order we'd arranged it. Every single detail that had been planned, discussed, revised, finalized, and protected over the course of a year landed exactly as intended. It was the first time in my adult life that something I had built was allowed to exist without being modified, redirected, or diminished for someone else's benefit. Lena walked toward me down that aisle and I forgot, for a full 4 seconds, that other people were present. She was wearing the dress she'd tried on 4 times before choosing, the one that made her mother cry and made my breath catch in a way that I didn't think actually happened outside of movies. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was ours, and nobody had taken it from us. Ronan was not invited. I didn't agonize over this decision. I simply didn't send a card. Carlo attended, but she was quiet, subdued in a way I'd never seen from her. No speeches about family sacrifice. No commentary about selfishness. No emotional mathematics about who deserved what and who should have given more. She hugged Lena after the ceremony and said, "It's beautiful." 2 words. No qualifiers. No follow-up about how the venue could have also served a graduation party 3 weeks earlier. It was the most honest thing she'd said to either of us in years, and I accepted it the way you accept a first step, small, imperfect, and pointed in the right direction. Thomas shook my hand at the reception and held on a beat longer than usual. He didn't say much. Thomas never does, and I've stopped expecting otherwise. But his eyes were wet, and he nodded once in a way that I understood to mean something close to. I should have been louder. I should have stood between you and this family when they were taking what was yours. I'm sorry I sat in my recliner and let it happen. He didn't say any of that, but the handshake said enough. During the reception, while the band played and guests danced and the caterers brought out the meal that had been planned for 12 months and executed without a single compromise, Lena leaned over and whispered something in my ear. "Thank you for not giving this up." I squeezed her hand. Never. Some of the family members who had originally pressured me to move the date came to the wedding. A few of them found me during the cocktail hour and apologized, quietly, in that uncomfortable way people do when they realize they were on the wrong side of something and hope a few words will close the gap. "We didn't know the whole story," they said. "We should have asked." I thanked them and moved on, because the evening was not about collecting apologies. It was about the woman in the white dress who had trusted me to protect something that mattered to both of us. Months have passed. Ronan and I don't speak. He never apologized. Not for taking the venue. Not for the unauthorized charges. Not for calling my wedding your thing. Not for any of it. Carla and I talk occasionally. The conversations are shorter and more careful than they used to be. She hasn't called me selfish since June. I consider that progress. Elliot started college in the fall. I sent him a card with some cash inside and a note that said, "Proud of you. The world is bigger than one bad party. Go learn everything." He texted me a thank you. We don't talk often, but when we do, It's easy in a way that it never is with Ronan. Elliot is not his father. I hold on to that. Lena and I framed one of the wedding photos and hung it in the hallway. The one taken during golden hour in the courtyard at Whitfield Hall. The string lights are visible in the background. The stone walls glow amber. Lena is laughing at something I said that I can't remember. Every time I walk past that photo, I think about how close we came to losing that moment. Not because of bad luck or bad timing, but because someone in my own family decided that what mattered to me was less important than what mattered to them, and expected me to agree. My brother told me to stop being selfish. My mother wrote it in the family chat. My father nodded along. My cousins echoed it. An aunt I barely speak to co-signed it. And for most of my life, I would have listened. I would have moved the date, swallowed the loss, smiled at the graduation party, handed over Whitfield Hall like a set of borrowed keys, and added it to the long, quiet list of things I gave up because someone told me that wanting something for myself was a character flaw. I had been doing it since I was old enough to understand that saying yes was easier than hearing my mother explain why my needs were less urgent than Ronan's. But Lena taught me something that my family never did, that protecting what you've built isn't selfish. It's the bare minimum of self-respect. And if the people who are supposed to love you can't tell the difference, that says everything about them and nothing about you. Last I heard, Ronan never threw Elliot a proper graduation party. He talks about rescheduling sometimes, but no venue has been booked, no invitations have been sent, and no date has been set. Elliot doesn't bring it up. He's busy with college, with his own life, with the future that exists beyond the empty hall his father promised and couldn't deliver. And Whitfield Hall still stands where it's always been, stone walls, string lights, wildflower meadow, hosting weddings and celebrations for people who book their own venues and pay their own deposits and don't expect someone else to hand over what they've built just because they ask loudly enough and bring their mother along for reinforcement. My brother told me to stop being selfish. So I did. I stopped being selflessly stupid. I stopped mistaking exploitation for love and compliance for peace. And I married the woman of my dreams in the exact place we'd chosen, on the exact date we'd planned, without apology and without compromise. Best decision I ever made.